The phone screen, blindingly bright in the pre-dawn gloom, held her words like a death sentence. It's all gone. I needed it. Gone. Just like that. The echo of those 3 words, delivered in the same breathless, entitled tone she'd perfected over 30 years, vibrated in the stillness of my bedroom. My breath hitched, a tiny, trapped bird in my chest. $15,000. Poof. Vanished into the ether of her latest crisis, her latest demand, her latest certainty that the world owed her exactly what she wanted, precisely when she wanted it. The digital ghost of my hard-earned security, ripped away in the dead of night, left a cold, gnawing hollowness where my trust used to reside. Life with my sister, Sarah, had always been a delicate tightrope walk over a pit of her unmet expectations and thinly veiled resentments. Our parents, bless their weary souls, had fostered a peculiar brand of unconditional love that, in Sarah's case, translated to unconditional permission to take. She was the younger one, the fragile flower, the one who needed constant reassurance and, apparently, constant financial propping. I, the elder, the steady one, the one who learned early to keep my head down and my own pockets lined, had become the silent bedrock of her chaotic existence. Our childhood home, still technically shared due to a tangle of estate logistics, was a constant, low-grade hum of her dramas. Empty bottles left on the counter, passive-aggressive notes about forgotten bills, the perpetual scent of desperation clinging to her like cheap perfume. She'd always been adept at the art of the slow bleed, the subtle siphon. A few dollars here, a borrowed piece of clothing there, a temporary loan that stretched into an eternity. It was the constant, gnawing awareness of her potential for escalation that had kept me vigilant, always guarding my own small empire of financial stability. But never this. Never like this. I remember the inheritance. Dad's meticulous accounting, Mom's quiet worry etched on her face as she signed away their joint accounts. Sarah, even then, had a peculiar glint in her eye. While I was calculating probate fees and potential tax implications, she was already mentally earmarking her share, envisioning the designer handbags and the spontaneous, wellness retreats that would inevitably consume it. She didn't mourn their passing with tears, she mourned the delay in her gratification. Weeks after the funeral, I found her in the study, a spreadsheet open on Dad's old laptop, not for memorialization, but for asset allocation. She was pointing at line items, her voice a conspiratorial whisper to herself. This is for the deposit on the apartment, this is for the trip to Bali. The sheer audacity of it, the chilling pragmatism of her grief, still sends a shiver down my spine. Then there was the time I'd finally managed to save enough for a down payment on my own place. A small, modest apartment, a sanctuary of my own. I'd shown Sarah the paperwork, the pre-approval letter, my heart swelling with pride. She'd looked at it, then at me, her eyes narrowed. You're really leaving? What about me? You know I can't manage on my own. Who's going to help me if something happens? The guilt trip was masterful, woven with threads of feigned helplessness and genuine venom. I'd almost faltered, almost let her talk me out of it. But something in my gut, a primal instinct for self-preservation, had held firm. I'd signed the lease, moved my things in, and fielded her indignant voicemails for weeks. She never visited. She never called to congratulate me. She simply sulked in her own self-pity, conveniently forgetting I existed unless she needed something. And the card. It wasn't just a piece of plastic, it was the culmination of years of disciplined saving, of prioritizing my future over fleeting desires. It represented late nights at work, skipped vacations, the careful budgeting that allowed me to build a buffer against life's inevitable storms. She knew this. She knew every transaction was scrutinized, every purchase a conscious decision. To take it, to use it without so much as a whisper of inquiry, was not just theft, it was a profound violation of trust, a declaration of war on my autonomy. The clock on my bedside table read 2:17 a.m. The house was suffocatingly silent, a silence that amplified the thumping in my ears. Her text message, stark and unforgiving, glowed on my phone. It's all gone. I needed it. I didn't respond. I didn't storm into her room, didn't demand explanations, didn't unleash the torrent of fury that threatened to consume me. Instead, a strange calm descended. The kind of calm that comes when a dam has finally burst and the ensuing flood renders further resistance futile. I sat up, the cool air against my skin, and reached for my laptop. The digital world, usually a tool for connection and convenience, now felt like a battlefield. With trembling fingers, I navigated to my banking portal. The numbers confirmed her brutal honesty. Every transaction, a dagger. A luxury spa treatment. A boutique clothing store. A high-end electronics retailer. A series of ATM withdrawals, each one a testament to her brazenness. The sheer speed and volume of it were staggering. She hadn't even bothered to spread it out, to make it look like a gradual erosion. This was a smash and grab, a complete and utter emptying of the vault. I scrolled through the dates, the times. All within the last few hours. The adrenaline surge gave way to a icy resolve. I remembered the conversation we'd had last month, after she'd accidentally maxed out a different card on a last-minute trip to Vegas. I'd sat her down, not in anger, but in a quiet, almost clinical tone, and explained the implications of her financial recklessness. I'd shown her my own credit score, the meticulous record-keeping that allowed me access to favorable rates and financial freedom. And then, I'd shown her something else. A single, innocuous-looking document. A power of attorney, drafted and signed with the foresight of someone who knew exactly the kind of person they'd be dealing with. I'd explained, in that same calm voice, that should my financial well-being ever be compromised by someone I trusted, this document would allow me to take preemptive measures. I hadn't elaborated, hadn't threatened. I'd simply stated it as a fact, a contingency plan. She'd waved it away, laughing. "Oh, you and your what-ifs," she'd said, rolling her eyes. So dramatic. Now, those what-ifs felt like the sturdy foundations of my future. I opened a new tab, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I accessed the online portal for the shared property. The one our parents had left jointly to us both, a tangled legacy that Sarah had always intended to leverage for her own gain, assuming I'd simply let her. I navigated to the section concerning co-ownership and property liens. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. I found the clause, buried deep within the legalese, the one I'd painstakingly researched with my lawyer. The clause that allowed for the sale of a co-owned asset in cases of extreme financial distress or demonstrable irresponsibility that threatened the asset's integrity. I didn't send an email. I didn't make a phone call. I initiated the process. Uploaded the necessary documentation, the evidence of her unauthorized access and exorbitant spending. I selected the option for an immediate, expedited review. The system acknowledged my request, a sterile confirmation appearing on the screen. It was done. The wheels were in motion. Then, I turned my attention to the credit card company. I initiated a formal dispute for every single transaction. The theft was undeniable, the timing blatant. I attached screenshots of her confession, the timeline of her spending. I didn't rage, I meticulously presented the facts. I requested immediate freezing of the account and an investigation. The first text from Sarah arrived at 6:03 a.m. "Are you awake? We need to talk about this." I ignored it. By 7:30 a.m., the house was stirring. The smell of burnt toast wafted from the kitchen, a familiar harbinger of morning chaos. Sarah appeared in my doorway, her hair a mess, her eyes puffy but defiant. "You saw my text," she stated, not a question. I nodded, still seated at my laptop, the screen now displaying a list of pending disputes. "I did." Her jaw tightened. "So? What are you going to do about it?" I finally looked up, meeting her gaze. The arrogance was still there, the expectation that I would, as always, find a way to absorb her latest transgression. "Nothing," I said, my voice deliberately neutral. "You took it. You spent it. You made your choices." Her eyes widened slightly. "But, we'll have to pay it back. You can't just let it sit there." "I'm not letting it sit there," I replied, turning back to the screen. I've disputed every charge. And I've initiated the process to sell the property. You know, the one we co-own. The one that's currently tied up in a process that doesn't look very favorable to someone who drains credit cards in the middle of the night. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, then closed. The defiance evaporated, replaced by a flicker of panic, then disbelief. You can't do that. That's not fair. Fairness, I said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips, is a concept you seem to have a very flexible definition of. You wanted $15,000? You got it. And now you're going to get the consequences. The text messages started flooding in then, a digital storm of Sarah's making. Frantic pleas for me to stop. Accusations of betrayal. Then, the flying monkeys descended. Mom, bless her heart, calling in tears, begging me to be the bigger person, to forgive. My aunt, ever the pragmatist, demanding to know what I was thinking, that this would tear the family apart. They didn't understand. They saw the immediate fallout, the immediate pain. They didn't see the years of silent endurance, the gradual erosion of my own sense of security. Sarah, stripped of her financial lifeline, floundered. The luxury spa treatments were forgotten, replaced by frantic calls to loan sharks and desperate attempts to sell off assets she'd acquired with my money. The property sale, though not immediate, was inevitable. The taint of her irresponsibility hung over it like a shroud. She was forced to accept a significantly reduced offer, the legal fees and the lien I'd placed on her share devouring whatever remained. Her social circle, accustomed to her extravagant gestures and easy money, began to distance themselves, their patience worn thin by her endless dramas. She became a pariah, her reputation preceding her like a particularly noxious cloud. And me? I watched from a distance, a quiet observer of her unraveling. There was no triumphant glee, no cathartic release. Just a profound, unsettling peace. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet, clean slate. The trust was shattered, irrevocably, but in its place was something stronger, a clear understanding of boundaries and the quiet power of their enforcement. The money was gone, a sacrifice made not in anger, but in calculated self-preservation. The emotional justice wasn't in her suffering, but in the absolute removal of her capacity to inflict further damage. The silence that followed her downfall was the most eloquent testament to the social consequences of her actions. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a chillingly final resolution to a long-fought battle. My credit card was stolen, yes, and $15,000 vanished. But in its wake, I reclaimed something far more valuable, my peace.